The Lifestyle Show, presented by Selina MacKenzie.
Now, our first guest today has written a book that describes his journey and experience with Nicole Brown Simpson and the greatest American crime story of our time. To tell us about his book called Stalked, welcome to the show, Keith Zlomsowitch. Did I get that right?
You got that perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Okie dokie. So for those that don't know the story, and I can't believe there's many that don't, can you just tell us a little bit about what happened to Nicole?
Well, Nicole was murdered along with Ron Goldman by OJ, her ex-husband, obviously. And it was a tragic circumstance. She had suffered years of abuse at his hands. So she had come out of a rocky marriage with him, obviously. And when I met her, she was just single for the first time. So we started a relationship that was constantly hounded by O.J. Simpson. He followed us everywhere. He stalked us. He watched us through the windows of houses, sometimes even making love while we were doing that. It was just a scary situation that ended up in a very tragic double murder. As everybody probably knows, he was found not guilty by a jury, but there were a lot of circumstances involved in that as well.
Okay. So how did you meet Nicole?
I was skiing in Aspen, Colorado at the time. I had 2 restaurants in Aspen and 3 in Los Angeles, Mezzaluna restaurants where Ron Goldman worked. And I just saw her, didn't know who she was, on the ski deck one day after skiing and thought she was the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen and approached her and introduced myself. And we sort of went from there. And she told me at that moment that she was just coming out of a abusive relationship and she had come to Aspen to flee from her abusive ex-husband.
And how long were you together, Keith?
Well, romantically, our relationship was only about a 3-month period. There was some timing involved in that. And then the specter of O.J. Simpson, stalking and following and threatening us was a big factor in that as well. But when it was time for me to go back to Aspen after my stint in L.A., we just sort of agreed that we would see where things took us. And then we became best friends for a year and a half. So the year and a half of her life where she only had some freedom for the first time, she was with OJ from the time she was 18 until they divorced at, a little over 30 years old. And then they tried a reconciliation 18 months later. So she only had that one period where she was on her own and was able to make her own decisions. And that's when I knew her and when we developed an incredible relationship and then friendship.
And when you say he was controlling, I mean, he really was controlling. He even told her how to dress, apparently.
Absolutely. And that's part of what I was just mentioning is to meet someone at 18 when you're that young and you're molded by an older gentleman like that, who's powerful and wealthy and very well connected. And he taught her, his way of doing things and he controlled everything about what she did on a daily basis, including what she wore and how she acted in public. So for that period of time when they were going through their relationship, she really didn't have a lot of freedom. And she told me of all the instances of abuse, both physical and mental. I mean, he controlled everything about her life. When she finally broke free is when I met her and she was a new person. She was trying to discover her own way again. And it was refreshing and beautiful to see. I miss that part of her.
And did she ever consider going to counselling or trying to find legal help?
Well, she did. She sought the legal system numerous times during their relationship. And as most listeners might know from following the trial, OJ was always sort of let off easy. The standards for a celebrity are much different than normal people over here. And the police never really held him to account for some of the things he did. And then through the divorce and ultimate breakup, she sought counseling to try to understand what it was that kept her in that relationship. And that's when I was with her. So we would often, talk about her therapy sessions and what she was doing to try to understand why she stayed in that relationship so long and ultimately went back to it. It's a crazy situation.
Yeah, it is a crazy situation, but we hear it so many times, when people have been abused that they do go back to the abuser.
Well, she only really wanted the wholeness of her family, and we talked about that many times. I discuss it in the book quite at length about our private conversations, that she really only ever wanted the father of her children, that whole family unit that everyone dreams about growing up. And she was willing to make one more chance at letting that happen. And it cost her life, and Ron Goldman as well.
Yeah, Ron Goldman, he was a waiter and aspiring model. Was she with him then on the night that she died?
Well, Ron Goldman was an employee of mine. He worked at one of my restaurants, which was Mezzaluna in Brentwood. It was Nicole's favorite restaurant, so we were there quite often. I was out of town when the murders happened, but Ron was just in the wrong place at the wrong time, in my humble opinion. I don't believe there was anything going on with them other than friendship. She was a regular at the restaurant, and everybody knew of our relationship, so they treated her with that kind of respect, obviously. But I think Ron just was trying to do something nice on the night of the murders and drop off the glasses, and showed up at the wrong place at the wrong time. And the book is titled Stalked, It Could Have Been Me, for a reason, because I'm fully aware that OJ probably thought that evening that it was me maybe coming through that gate, knowing that she was at Mezzaluna, one of my restaurants, not having seen me in quite some time, seeing a figure come through the gate in the heat of what was going on. A lot of people thought the next morning, before they identified Ron's body, that indeed it was me that was there. So people were reaching out, trying to get a hold of me.
It must be really frightening to think that, what could have been.
Yeah, I live with that every day. It's been, over 30 years, but there's not a day goes by where I don't have some sort of flashback to, those times and that particular moment where, by chance it could have been me.
Now, this all happened over 30 years ago, back in 1994. Why have you come out now, Keith, to talk about it and to write the book?
In all honesty, because he's dead. I didn't feel safe.
Yeah, I can understand that.
To put this in print while he was still alive. There's a lot of things I mentioned in the book about past incidents of his behavior that aren't very flattering, obviously, and he wouldn't have taken it very well. So, I had to live my whole life knowing that there was a possibility he was, looking for me or coming after me because he hated me with such passion that I wasn't about to write the book while he was still alive. So I started thinking about it after he died. It took me some time to formulate it. And as a first-time author, it was a kind of a slow process, but I finally got it done.
And did he ever physically hurt you?
Physically, no, but he certainly made his intentions very well known to me. I mean, by busting through the back door of her house one day after he watched us the night before, getting in my face, with the finger, the whole, you don't know who I am kind of thing. And Nick always told me that there were two O.J. Simpsons, the one that everybody sees, the public persona, and the private O.J. Simpson that no one sees except for her. And she told me numerous times, you don't ever want to be left alone with that O.J. Simpson because you don't know what he's capable of. So I was aware there was a danger, an imminent danger.
And how was it writing the book? It must have been quite an emotional experience.
It was. Like I said, as a first-time writer, it was a new process for me. So I did what I thought would be best for the reader, which was I sort of wrote it almost like a walking journal. So it reads really easy. It's linear, so it goes, from point A to point B timeline-wise. And it reads very quickly because it's almost like you're just on a journey with me. You're sitting on my shoulder as I'm telling you these events and stories, like a walking journal. So that was my process. I think it came out okay, and hopefully the readers agree with me.
I'm sure they will. And how did you find out that sadly she'd been killed? Because, of course, it happened and then there was the Bronco chase, wasn't there, where the police were chasing him. Did somebody tell you immediately that it happened, or did you find out the next day? Or
Well, I was in Atlanta, so the time change was a few hours difference. I was woken up by a phone call from one of my best friends who knew of my relationship with Nicole and was concerned. for me, didn't know where I was. And he said, dude, turn on the news right away. So I did. I saw what was happening. I reached out to the family immediately. And they asked me to please come to LA and be a part of the funeral, be a pallbearer at her funeral. So let me just put into context my week for the listeners real quickly. I find out she's murdered on Monday morning in Atlanta. I fly out. I get there Wednesday. The funeral's on Thursday. It was so quick. So I see the family for the first time on Thursday at the funeral. And I find out that she was talking about me the night she was murdered. I was told by Denise, her sister, that that's what they were talking about at dinner that night. So I'm heartbroken. I'm standing next to the casket of the woman I loved, knowing that he killed her, and he's standing 2 feet away from me. He was still free. The Bronco chase wasn't till the day after the funeral. So for the 8 hours or so that it took for the mass and the burial, I had to stand next to O.J. Simpson, knowing what he did to her. And it was just a horrible time. And then flash forward to the next day and the Bronco chase. And then 2 days later, I'm a witness for the grand jury. So it was a hell of a 7 or 8 day period. I can tell you that.
It must have been. And why do you think that he was found innocent? It seems so obvious from everything that we know that he was guilty.
Well, the jury, in my opinion, and not just my opinion, because they've made these statements publicly numerous times since the verdict, they felt like it was their chance to get back at LAPD and the district attorney's office for years of systemic racism in the Los Angeles area. Everybody who lives there is aware of it. I lived there during the riots that took place in 1992. That's actually when Nicole and I were together. So, the whole city knew that the Rodney King verdicts sort of shaped African Americans' view of the LAPD, and the jury was predominantly black. And the overwhelming feeling was that they went with their hearts and not their heads. They discounted the evidence, and they went with the opportunity to sort of get back at LAPD, and found him not guilty because of that.
Crazy. And because they let him out, he went on to be convicted of multiple felonies, including conspiracy, kidnapping, robbery with a deadly weapon. So he ended up in jail anyway.
And that's what sociopaths like that do. They feel they're above the law. He had numerous incidents, not just the main one that put him in jail for 9 years, but where he assaulted people in Miami where he lived. I got a little bit of peace and quiet for those 9 years when he was in jail, where I could sleep a little easier, but he got out far too soon. But that's just his personality. He thought he was above the law and figured he got away with, something so horrific as murder. Why not try to rob and, hold somebody hostage for possessions like he did?
Yeah. Are you still in touch with Nicole's family?
Yeah, we've always stayed in touch over the years. Her parents have passed away several years back. The sisters are still all three doing fine and thriving. And there's numerous friends that I met through Nicole over the years that I've remained incredible friends with. Yeah, we're sort of a little fraternity of friends that went through this together and came out on the other side and still obviously keep in touch and try to keep Nicole's memory alive, and Ron's as well.
Yeah, for sure. Well, if our listeners want to read the story that'll help you better understand the crime and the trial of the century, they're calling it. The book is called Stalked. It's by Keith Zlomsowitch. Zlomsowitch. It's not easy to say.
It's available on Amazon.
It is available on Amazon and also on our website, TRE.radio. Keith, thank you very much for joining us today.
Selina, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye.